Hi, I'm Asim. I'm going to break down the news from using clips from Al Jazeera, BBC News, Sky News, and all the other major outlets. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like, and share. Thank you.
Isra, her mom,
Yeah, Miss
grabs
Rachel.
her phone and has her little boys on FaceTime. And her boys are adorable. I think they're around age 7 and 9. And they're in Gaza. And here I am, like, thinking, like, trying to be sweet and talk to her boys in, like, the Miss Rachel voice. But I'm also like, what if my son was over there and my husband, and then I'm here with my little girl losing her legs? And then I'm thinking about the boys, and I was asking if there's any way they can come here. And this wonderful woman was saying, because I was asking kind of her to, she was translating, and I said, is there any way for them to come here? And she was saying no. And she was saying they don't eat anymore on FaceTime with them. Sorry.
No, it's
Dang,
a
man.
horrific
Make Rachel,
situation.
Miss Rachel cry.
And then the translator, I remembered she had said, like, thank you for seeing our children as human, when I had spoke out before. And so I want those little boys to have everything my little boy has. And their mom's a teacher like me. She's a math teacher.
Wow.
So we're both teachers, and our children are our world. A friend recently told me about a quote from Jewish text, which is, every life is a universe. And I wrote that down. I just thought it was so beautiful.
Iran has never attacked a neighbor. Israel has repeatedly attacked its neighbors. Iran signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Israel has refused to sign. Iran submits to inspection by the International Nuclear Energy Agency. Israel
Got a smirk on his face.
refuses to submit. Iran has no nuclear weapons. Israel has between 75 and 400 nuclear weapons. So Israel poses an existential threat to Iran. For the last 40 years, Israel has conducted a systematic campaign of disinformation about Iran. Why the lies? Why the double standards? Why the hypocrisy?
Watching this Israeli spokesperson being destroyed on air on mainstream media outlets is certainly cathartic. Throughout 20 months of genocide, the vast majority of the Western media have allowed the Israeli state to lie, to distort, to deflect, to upend reality, to gaslight. Well, in Britain and other European countries, certainly something seems to be suddenly shifting. Alas, long after Gaza was essentially wiped from the face of the earth. The Israeli spokesman, David Mencer, is British by origin, and his political activities in the UK should disturb you, certainly disturb me. I'll come on to that. Let's start with this interview on Sky News with the presenter, Kamali Melbourne.
The Israeli army, they issued warning shots in the air, and still some of these suspects continued to advance towards the troops in a threatening manner. Still, further fire was directed close to them, but not to them, but they continued their advance. So we know very well about this report, but I must tell you again that we have released verifiable footage of Hamas gunmen themselves firing at Gaza.
David, yes, but the footage that you just alluded to from the incident on Sunday is disputed. It was not of the
I don't think it's
Gaza
disputed at
Foundation.
all.
Humanitarian
I don't think
Foundation
it's
site.
disputed. No, I don't agree with you. I don't think it's disputed at all. It's probably
This is blame Hamas, this, Hamas, that.
disputed by people that want Hamas to retain control of aid distribution. But we're not going to have that anymore, because
So
that
let's
is
talk
their
about
last
this incident. Let's
vestiges
talk about
of
this
control.
incident on Tuesday. Okay, David, let's talk about this incident on Tuesday. 27 people killed. You say there was a threat. Did they have weapons?
Have weapons, that's what.
Well, you'll have to ask the IDF for the specifics points
I'm asking
about
you.
that.
You're here to speak.
Right, and
for the Israeli
I'll
government.
tell you that the IDF is not preventing the arrival of Gazans at humanitarian
That was
sites.
not my question, David,
It's
as you well know.
precisely the
Did they
opposite.
have weapons,
It's
David?
precisely the opposite. We are encouraging it. Now, the warning shots were fired away from the aid distribution point in response to the threat perceived by IDF troops. Now,
Listen, let me pause it 1 second. You can't win with these guys. You know, they're gonna lie their arse off, you know.
we are facilitating, using this independent operation of this NGO, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, specifically precisely to ensure that aid reaches civilians and not Hamas.
Yeah.
There have been many, many occasions of Hamas lying to international media, and unfortunately, international media repeating those lies, and that very often
we're
leads
not
to
repeating
dead
any lies, David. I'm
news.
putting the questions to you, and as you well know, in recent weeks we have spoken to Hamas about this. This 27 that were killed, 3 children were killed, 2 women. Were they a threat as well?
Again, every bit of news which comes out of Hamas, of Gaza, is controlled by the terrorist organization. There have been many, I can read
So
you
we can't be
a
trusted,
whole
is what you're
list.
saying.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that you need to verify. Do your jobs,
We'd
media.
love to, David.
We
We
are
would
not
love,
preventing
To argue with the presenter.
David.
Gazans
We
from
would, as
accessing
you know, David,
humanitarian
and as
aid.
you and I have spoken about before, we would love to verify this, but international journalists are not allowed into Gaza, are they? Why not?
Well, I'll tell you very, very clearly what the reason is for that. Our priority is getting our hostages out, not Sky's journalists in. That's our priority. That's what we care about. Now, real journalists enter Gaza with the IDF. Hamas journalists, unfortunately, never leave because they work with Hamas. And to be fair to those journalists reporting from Gaza, you won't be alive very long if you ever do produce any sort of output that is against Hamas, because Hamas will kill you. So many so-called journalists in Gaza, and of course we regret any journalists which have been killed, real journalists, but Hamas operatives.
You're distinguishing
with press
between real
vests.
journalists and fake journalists. The point is, David, journalists
Hamas-
aren't allowed, from international organisations, are not allowed into Gaza either. And I'm asking you again, why you don't allow that? Why don't the Israeli government allow journalists in? You'll know the charge that's put to the Israeli government is that they don't want the world to see what's really happening.
Again, so there's no shortage of output from Gaza. It's been on our front of our screens for 20 months now. But our priority is getting our hostages out.
You're not letting-
We want
yes,
to get
no.
our live hostages out, not sending your
Yeah, let me pause it 1 second. This is why they're afraid, you know. They're gonna be exposed, and that's why they don't let anyone in, you know. Can say they're afraid, but the evidence is against them. They just don't want anyone because they're coming in, they're reporting on the facts. They can see you through the drone footage, everything, you know.
journalists in. I will remind you that Hamas arrested a BBC journalist about 10 years ago, and they held him, and he was only released when there was an international outcry, and finally Hamas released him. Now, that same outcry has not happened for our Israeli people being held hostage for more than 600 days now. Our priority is getting our hostages out, not sending your journalists in.
David, that's entirely misleading. You know that there has been international condemnation of the hostages that are still being held. It is untrue for you to make that charge. Right?
I'm not talking about condemnation in words. I'm talking about real action. When real pressure is put on Hamas, the terror organization.
Well, last week, 9 out of 10 children in one home where 2 doctors reside were killed in an airstrike.
Well,
what was
isn't it
that?
remarkable?
Well, what was that?
That has been based.
For some clarity and some context, she is a lawyer representing Israel, and Piers Morgan is about to dismantle her, pulling out the facts, you know, and she can't really answer properly. Let's get into it.
Only on the basis of hearsay.
You don't
and
believe that
secondhand
story?
Information. I want these stories.
Wait a minute. You don't believe that those children were killed?
I have seen conflicting accounts, and I want that story to be properly investigated before the international media runs with it. I have.
You think those 2 parents, one of whom I think operated on one of the children?
I have a question.
You think that those 2 doctors, the parents, they just made it up?
Why are
that
those
9 of their
children
10 children had been blown to pieces by an Israeli airstrike?
If this is
You don't believe it?
well, why on
Can't
earth was
rely on Israel,
artificially generated imagery used to promote this story when it first
I've
happened.
got to say,
We've seen
Natasha,
time
I think
and time
what you've
again.
just said about that
Piers
family
Morgan, we've seen
is despicable.
We've seen time
I'm
and time
sorry,
again.
it's despicable.
What is truly
As somebody, you talk
despicable-
about blood libel, like Dave said, you talk about blood libel, you talk about lies,
All I said,
you talk about
Piers,
promoting
was that there were
propaganda,
conflicting
and here you sit
accounts.
here as a lawyer and you say that you do not believe those 9 children were
I
killed.
didn't say that. You're putting
You
words
did.
in my mouth.
Do you believe it or not?
I said that there were conflicting
Do you believe
accounts
it?
and it needs to be
Do you
investigated.
believe it?
I thought you would be
The
first
parents said
person
9 of their
that
10
wants-
children were killed.
They
Do you
haven't-
believe them
they
or not?
haven't- they
Or
haven't
did those
said
2
that directly.
doctors make it up?
They haven't said that directly as far as I have seen. I have seen second-hand accounts and hearsay, but it's important to ask, why are these civilians still there? Why is it that
Actually, no, it's
uniquely-
important to us whether you believe that family have lost 9 of their 10 children.
I want
Actually,
to know why the international
you don't, do you?
community...
You don't. And this goes to the point that I would say about Israel
Why are
generally
these
now, in this war now.
Palestinian civilians
Israel says they don't believe anything.
coming out of
Everything,
Hamas,
every
indeed.
story that comes out about the deaths of civilians in Gaza,
Because there is a
someone
track
will
record
pop
of
up
lies.
representing the Israeli government saying, it's propaganda, it's not true, I've heard it's not right, I've heard it didn't happen. And the reason you can get away with it, frankly, is because you won't allow, the Israeli government won't allow, I'm going to keep putting you in the government, but you defend them. The Israeli government refuses to allow international journalists to get in there and do their job and verify whether any of these things are actually
So I
happening
have been
when
there.
you say they didn't happen.
I can help you with why. I've been there in September and seen a great deal of the Hamas terror infrastructure with my own eyes, including the fact that when we were in Rafah, every second building was being used
you see any dead
by
children?
Hamas. No, and this is the
Wow.
important factor.
Why do you think that?
Our movements...
Is that because there aren't any,
No.
or because you were being given a sanitized little tour,
No, we were
which
being-
didn't involve seeing the bodies of dead children?
We were very restricted because of the nature of the battlefield in
What
in
right
Gaza.
does the IDF have to restrict journalists doing their job? In every
well,
other
on the
war I've
basis-
ever been involved in, including sending my Daily Mirror journalists to cover the Iraq war in Baghdad, where they rang me at midnight to ask if they should leave or stay in a hotel, the Baghdad Hilton, I think it was called, before shock and awe arrived. So huge responsibility on my shoulders then about the lives of my journalists, but they were prepared to risk them to report the truth to the wider world. Israel has decided no journalists from outside can go in
For 3 reasons.
and make that assessment themselves.
Yes.
What right does Israel have to do that?
For 3
There are
reasons.
no
Will you allow me to
reasons.
finish?
Well, there are no
None of your
reasons.
business.
Well, you've
It's
just
none
asked
of
me-
your business
you've
whether
just-
the journalists view
you
their
just- well,
safety
you
as being
haven't-
at risk.
I'm sorry.
I admire you being a lawyer and trying to defend your client. I guess that's what lawyers got to do, no matter how guilty your client is. Pierce, if I'm ever charged with murder, get this lady to represent me. So that's who I want on my team. But the reason why everyone is so outraged is because they're falling for these propaganda. The truth is that the reason why Pierce and so many people around the world are turning on what the Israeli government is doing is because it's just so freaking horrible. Because we're seeing images every day of children suffering through an ungodly fate. We all sit there and think, my God, if those were our kids. It's a pure reaction to witnessing evil. And you got to sit here and spin the fact that this is all propaganda or it's all lies. I mean, look, bottom line is that 2 former Israeli prime ministers are not falling for propaganda.
And you know what,
It's
Dave?
just that
You know
at this
what?
point,
One of them-
they can't deny it.
Right, and one of them, Ehud Olmert, he said to me that he thinks Netanyahu, A, should have resigned by now, but B, will
They're
be
gonna
in The
become
Hague
freaky.
one day, being held accountable for these war crimes. And, I mean, I guess my question for you, Natasha, you're a lawyer. Would you be prepared to defend him if Netanyahu appeared at The Hague?
We're talking about the International Criminal Court.
Would you be
which
prepared
has-
to defend him or
No,
not?
well, let me be clear about the context, because this is important. We're talking about the International Criminal
That's it
Court,
for the video
which has no
today,
jurisdiction.
guys. If you like the video, please like, share and comment. Thank you.